The Weekly Show with David J. Maloney. And now, here's your host, David J. Maloney.
Welcome, everyone, to The Weekly Show. I'm your host, David J. Maloney. On tonight's show, we've got a really special guest. He came out on the national stage with his self-titled record, Rockie Lynne, and his hit country song, Lipstick. His current documentary, Rockie Lynne, Where I Belong, reveals his incredible journey from orphan to successful songwriter to being found again by his biological father. His new album, Love, is a testament to all the best aspects of the Rockie Lynne story, and it's sure to warm the heart for years to come. Here, after the break to chat about it all, is Rockie Lynne. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Our featured guest tonight is a country artist who burst onto the scene with his self-titled album, Rockie Lynne, and his hit songs, More and Lipstick. His new documentary, Rockie Lynne, Where I Belong, airing on PBS and Amazon Prime, reveals the incredible journey he's taken in life, from orphan to successful recording artist, and to now owning his biological father's Martin guitar. You really can't make this stuff up. Here to chat about it all and his brand new record, Love, is none other than Rockie Lynne. Rockie, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, David. What a pleasure to be on your show, and thank you for having me, sir.
So, Rockie, man, what a journey your life has been, and what a story you have to tell. I'd like to start kind of at the beginning. I know you were an orphan and adopted young, if I understood correctly. What is your first conscious memory of your adopted mother and father?
Well, my first memory, I guess, gosh, that's I haven't been asked that before. So, my first memory of my mother, well, in the old days, I'm about 200 years old, but in the old days, orphanages were these big, long metal. There was a brick building that I was in. There was about maybe 200 of us, and usually the babies get adopted pretty quick. But if you make it past infanthood and you get to 3, 4, 5 years old, you're pretty much going to be there. That's how that goes. My mom and dad, the lady and gentleman that adopted me, who I call my mom and dad, they had trouble having children on their own, and they were very blue collar folks, and so they were allowed, I guess, to adopt one of the older kids. And I remember the day that my mom walked in, and she looked right at me. I was sitting up in the front next to the record player, and she said, "That's the one. I want that one." As soon as she saw me, which is a joy. And my dad, who talks like the guy in Sling Blade. You ever seen that movie Sling Blade?
No, I was out sick that day.
Like with Billy Bob Thornton, anyway. It's an old movie he made. In that movie, he talks like the guy in Sling Blade. He goes, "Don't pick the first one you see." That's how it started. That's funny. I hadn't thought about that in forever. That's great. Yeah. So I remember the first day that I met them. But the reality is that those two people, David, were the first people that ever cared if I had anything to eat. They aren't the first people that cared if I had any clothes on my back, or if I was going to get some kind of education or have some kind of life. Both of them grew up in the Depression era. My dad was a Korean War veteran. He had to quit school in the 5th grade so he could raise his 10 brothers and sisters, because his dad was paralyzed from a car accident. He's missing 2 fingers on his left hand, and he had to work really, really hard. And he was determined that I would not go through that same endeavors that he went through. So he was kind of tough on me, and he wanted me to have a better life than him. And I hope he's 92 years old now, and he lives right behind me in a little, what they call a tiny house. And I get to make sure that he has food and a roof over his head on the last part of his journey. So I have to tell you, man, that I always knew I would do it. I didn't know it would mean so much to me to care for him and to be able to help him as he transitions onto the next part of whatever waits for him,
I mean, obviously you didn't know anything about your birth father and his connection to country music while growing up, but surely, given the trajectory of your life, your adopted mom and dad, I presume, had some musical tastes or influences which played some sort of role. What kind of music was being listened to in your home growing up, and what influence would you say your adopted mom and dad had on the trajectory your life took musically?
Well, that's a great question, David. There was very little music in our home. We were poor. My dad Like I said, he had quit between the fifth and sixth grade, so he had to work as a maintenance man at a furniture factory, and he worked hard. He got up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and he'd get home when it was dark, and he'd work at the house until it was time to go to bed. We didn't have a television. We didn't have a radio for a long time. Eventually, we got a radio, but it was only an AM radio. And so there was no music except for church music. And that was at the Baptist church on Sunday morning, Sunday evening, and Wednesday. We were there all the time, and they were singing the bringing in the sheaves and all that kind of stuff. And I really loved that music, to be honest with you. I couldn't read the hymnals, but I remember very early on as they were playing those, most of those uh, hymnals are kind of, one chord to the dominant fifth chord and back, that sort of kind of waltzy marching sort of sound. And I would make up my own words to the words they were thinking. Of course, and I would think to myself at 5, I'm thinking, I think my song's better than the Bring in the Sheaves song, because I didn't know what a sheave was, right? So there wasn't a lot of music, and it wasn't encouraged in my house because my dad really wanted me to get an education, and he wanted me to his idea of success would be working at a bank or something like that. And unfortunately, from the moment I was 4 or 5 years old, I always knew that I wanted to try to learn how to play guitar. And so, as I stated earlier, I'm about 200 years old now, and I'm still trying to learn how to play the guitar.
So is that when you would say the music bug bit you, or was it at some other point when you heard something else, like a country song, or like a lot of people, the Beatles or something?
Well, at the orphanage, this man came. They used to take us into the laundry room, which was a big open area in front of the washers, and people would come and read stories and um, they would do things to read to the orphans there. And this man came in. His name was Niley, and he played acoustic guitar, and he sang, "I'm going to Alabama" with a banjo on my knee. And I was sitting right in front of him, kind of squatted, just watching this man play. And then that was it. That was when I got what I call the disease. I mean, it just totally engulfed me, and I thought, I want to learn how to do that. And I knew at that point that was what I was going to do. And then it took a really long time for me to actually get a guitar because I got adopted. We were financially challenged, so I ended up between my fifth grade and sixth grade year, I mowed yards with this guy who had a little lawn mowing company. The company consisted of a push mower and a ride mower. He would ride and I would push. And we mowed yards, and I made $100, and I ordered a guitar from J.C. Penney. So I got that going into the sixth grade, but I'd wanted one since I was just a small child. I had wanted that guitar. So when I finally got my hands on one, I had all these things I'd made up in my mind of what it would sound like and what it would do. And I should mention, a couple years before that, at the First Baptist Church in Statesville, North Carolina, at a yard sale, I got a phonograph with 2 albums. And the 2 albums were Kiss Alive and Jimi Hendrix, Axis Bold as Love. At a church yard sale, they were 75 cents, and my mom gave me 75 cents, and she was more concerned about getting the quarter back than she was the money. And I knew that my dad would ban that music as soon as he heard it. So I kept it in my closet in my room, and I'd listen to it with my head right next to the speaker for hours and hours at night. And I would look at the pictures. And so in the pictures, I wanted to be Gene Simmons, but the sound I heard in my head was Ace Frehley. So that was the music that just took me over and made me wanted to be that guy. I still got that guitar. You want to see it? I think it's right here. Hold on a second.
Great.
I still got that guitar I bought for $100.
Well, you know what's funny is I was Ace Frehley for like Halloween for like when I was like 10 and 11 or 11 and 12 for like 2 years in a row.
Did you do your own makeup?
Yeah, did my own makeup and made all the silver parts with aluminum foil.
Oh, that's great, man.
Yeah, how crazy
is
that?
The guitar I bought for $99 at J.C. Penney's. It's a global, and it was made at the Matsushita factory in Japan, and it still plays and sounds pretty dang good, man.
That's wild.
You got any pictures of that Ace Frehley thing?
I don't have pictures of that, but I did eventually get to go to a show and had a buddy who worked backstage, and he was able to sign one of the very first albums for me. But yeah, I had Alive 2. I remember those albums, and it was mostly because my uncle, who was only 4 years older than me, was into that and influenced me in that way. So how did you originally find your way then to the country music capital of the world, Nashville? How did you end up transitioning from Kiss Alive to country music? Where does that segue occur?
So between when I got my guitar, by the time I was in the seventh grade, I was playing with grown men our age. I'm probably a little older than you, but my age, I was playing with men. So instead of working like at fast food joints and stuff like that, all of my music through high school was that's how I made a living. I played in bands with old men, and they played all kinds of music. You know, it was rock, country, like a variety cover band kind of thing. And so I'd made up my mind that I wanted to go to Los Angeles, California, and be Eddie Van Halen. That was my whole plan. That was the entirety of my plan, and I didn't know how to get there, so I joined the Army. So, and as much patriotic things as I do now, and how proud I am of my service, and how proud I am of being a veteran, the Army gave me way more than I ever gave it, because it gave me an opportunity, a chance to reach for something bigger, to have just, sometimes I think seeing out of maybe a poverty situation is just being able to see above the ability to get out, to find your own way. So I got out of the Army and I moved to California, and I went to this guitar school there called GIT, and then I worked there for a little while afterward, and I auditioned for every kind of rock band you could ever imagine. Maybe, I don't know how many, but dozens of auditions, and I didn't get any of them. I got none of them. And then I realized that I didn't drink, I didn't do drugs, I didn't curse. I do all that stuff now, but I didn't do any of it then. So I wasn't getting the gig because I wouldn't have been a good hang. So I left California and I ended up in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, playing with this guy named Michael Shane. He was probably before the internet, so he's probably not stuff on there, but he was this great singer. That's where he taught me a lot about, like, the first night I played with him, I had just come from California and I was playing at a jazz gig called the Allender. They had a saxophone, a piano, and a guitar, and we would play real book tunes like Girl from Ipanema and stuff like that.
Like bossa nova.
Yeah, that kind of stuff.
Wow.
And then but the people that owned that dinner nightclub had another club that had this famous guy named Mike Shane playing at it. So I went to see them, and I stood in the back, and he came on stage and sang. And I was same as when I saw Niley play guitar. I was like, my God, his words are just moving and beautiful. So I went up to him afterward and I said, I'd like to play in this band. And he said, are you that kid from the Islander? That's when I was a kid, I guess. And I said, I hope so. And he said, well, you start tomorrow night. And so the next night, I'm on stage with Mike Shane and his band, and I'd never played a country gig, like a straight out country gig ever. And I'd come right from trying to learn how to play Yngwie Malmsteen and Joe Satriani and Frank Gambale and Scott Hendricks and Pat Metheny and Al Di Meola. That was where my head was. And so he plays, like Good-Hearted Woman or something. Then he gives me the solo, and I play the absolute worst possible, horrible, too many notes, too fast, too loud guitar solo ever done in the history of country music. If they were to rank the worst solos ever, that would be number one by far. At the end of that night, he gave me a cassette, of Vern Gosdin, Chiseled in Stone, which is one of the best country records ever made. He said, learn how to play this, and you'll know how to play country music. So I went back to the little camper trailer that I was renting there at the beach, and I stayed up. I didn't sleep. I just drank coffee and I stayed up. And the next night, when he would sing those Vern Gosdin songs, I would play those songs, and I would play those same licks on all the other country songs. And at the end of the night, he came up to me and he said, I didn't mean in one night. I didn't mean go home and learn how to play country. And not that I learned how to play it, because I still don't know. But this is how I got to Nashville. At the end of the summer, playing at that restaurant with him every night, he said, I'm going to go to Nashville and I'm going to make a demo. And I want you to come with me. So bring your bags and bring your stuff, because we're going to be there for a while. And he drove me up to Nashville, Tennessee, in his Dodge Ram SUV, which I thought was cool as heck. And we stayed at a place called the Hall of Fame Motel, which is down on Demumbrian, and it sounds really nice, but it's not. And for some reason, when we would do road gigs back then, we would usually stay, all of us would stay in rooms together. We would share rooms. But that night, he got his own room and he got me my own room. And the next morning, when I woke up, there was an envelope underneath my door that said, "This is where you belong. Here's $1,000 to get on your feet. I'll have your truck shipped to you." So that's how I got to Nashville, Tennessee. I was dropped off and left at a hotel because the man that I was playing for thought I needed to be there. And he was right, because that's where I met a bunch of that very night I got invited to the Grand Ole Opry by Red Volkart, Merle Haggard's guitar player, who I met in Printer's Alley the night before. And it was different than LA because you didn't have to be somebody and you didn't have to look a certain way. And even in retrospect, I might have actually looked the part, but I didn't have the social skills to be the part, because I'd never really, my first time leaving North Carolina was going in the Army, and I spent 3 years in the infantry. That doesn't prepare you for anything except gunfire.
Did anybody take you under their wing in Nashville?
Oh, many, many people. If I could, there were so many names. I would start with Mark Prentice, who is a session bass player, guitar player. He's played with everybody from the Rascals, Felix Cavalieri, all the way to the girl from Greece. Oh my God, her name escapes me, but you know what I'm talking about, the super fancy. Anyway, he's played with everybody. And I remember doing a showcase with him. He was showcasing my music, and we had people come. I'd been doing nightclubs at that point, playing a lot of places like the Grizzly Rose and Billy Bob's, just nightclubs, but playing my music. And we were doing a showcase, and he was playing bass for me. I'd hired all Nashville guys that I knew to do the showcase, and the room was full. And I was so nervous before we went on stage. I was just sitting up there, and I was just scared to death. And it was just he and I in the room. And he said, "Do you have any children?" And I said, "Yeah, I have these little girls." And he said, "You ever give them a gift?" And I said, "Of course." He goes, "Why do you give them the gift?" And I said, "What are you talking about? We're getting ready to go on stage." He says, "Why do you give your children a gift?" And I said, "Because I think they might enjoy it." And he said, "That's why God gave you the love of music, hoping that you would enjoy it, that you would love it and get the most for it, not fret about it and worry about it. What good's that going to do? Why don't you just walk out there and do whatever it is you do?" And that changed my life, David, because ever since that day, I never felt like I don't have anything to prove anyway. I'm not that good. I'm just trying to learn how to do it, you know? So I take those things to heart. And I could sit here and talk for days about the people that took this kid that didn't have I wasn't a bad person. I just didn't talk. Like, I was really quiet, and because I didn't know what to say, and I didn't really know how to handle social situations. So I think that a lot of the things that have happened over the last couple decades have been me more maturing as a human being than it has me maturing as a musician.
Well, the reason why I asked if anybody took you under their wing is because when you said that you got dropped off in basically Nashville, not knowing, I kind of saw this parallel between you being dropped off, and not necessarily, I mean, with the way, you know, as an orphan, and then dropped off in Nashville.
Oh, man.
And in both cases, you've got people who came in and took you. You know what I mean?
Exactly. That's a tremendous parallel, and it's I never thought about it till now, but you're exactly right. That's true. You know, there's always been someone there. It seems like, you know, in the Army there were the men. I went in the Army shortly after Vietnam, and so all the drill sergeants and the airborne instructors, they were all Vietnam guys who had been in combat in country. And so they always just pointed you in the right direction. They'd kick your butt and tell you to get up and make your bed and go to work. And so I continued that after the Army. And I look back at my life now. I've got a family, and I've got a career, and I'm on the David J. Maloney show, and it's going good. And it's going good because some people took enough time to point me in the right direction. And I don't know how much you know about me, but I spend a lot of my life trying to do that same thing with the young people around here. When we came back from Nashville to care for my dad in the last part of his life, there were so many young musicians around here and so many young people who had that same exact wanderlust in their eyes that I had. And if I could somehow or another help them avoid a pothole or two, because I've hit all of them, every single one of them you could hit, that would be a blessing to them. And it would be something that I feel good about being able to help somebody uh, because so many people helped me.
Well, and you'd mentioned Mark Prentice earlier, and at one point in your new documentary, Mark Prentice, who's, I mean, he's a Grammy Award-winning producer and writer. I think he said that you, and I quote, remind him constantly of the reason why we got into this business. Now, to me, that's like one of the highest compliments somebody like Mark could give an artist. You know, people like you are the reason I got into this business. What does a compliment like that mean to you?
I was stunned that he said that. And I think it's because, like, I meet a lot of people at the place that we're at, playing small theaters and medium-sized theater and county fairs and stuff like that, where they had a hit years ago and they like, oh, I got to sing my hit. I never really felt that way. Like every time we get ready to do lipstick, I'm excited to do lipstick. When we're ready to play more, I'm excited. I had an attorney in Minneapolis who was trying to help me get a record deal, and he said to me one time, because it was such an arduous task, you know, and he said, I think you're just too stupid to quit. He was probably right, you know. But that naivete also makes me love it the same exact way that I loved watching Niley Binge play Going to Alabama with a banjo on my knee. I take every gig, whether it's one person I just sang for a group of people at a hospice house here in Statesville. That's as important to me as the times I've got to sing on the Grand Ole Opry, because this art that we make, this thing that we get to do, I do something for a living that I would have done anyway. I would have done for free. I would be, well, you know, mostly I did do it for free, but I would do that anyway. And I think it's something that you don't earn. I think it's given to you. And that was a gift given to me, that I truly, truly love music and have a desire to try to figure out how to do it.
Well, you know, and I was thinking, based on what he said, that, you know, even back in those early days, people could see your passion was going to likely take you somewhere. That's our show for tonight. Thank you so much for watching. A special thanks to Rockie Lynne for joining us. Rockie will be back again next week to finish up our interview, so please tune back in. Stay safe, everyone.